Hello, my name is John Krupp, and today I'll be discussing proactive versus reactive crisis management, a study of the Jerry Sandusky scandal and the Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 response. Key elements in planning a response to a crisis are present in both proactive and reactive crisis management. An organization must not ignore the crisis. In doing so, they have to check for the severity of the crisis, finding the cause of the crisis, and then once they do these three things, they need to create a crisis management team, which would create a crisis management plan to deal with the crisis. In dealing with the crisis, an organization has to choose between a proactive or a reactive response. A proactive response would be used when there's an immediate response necessary. An immediate response would be needed if there's a general interest in the incident on social media. There may be a legal requirement, such as a financial requirement, that is needed in the New York Stock Exchange if anything happens. There may be injuries or safety compromised or possible environmental issues that come with the crisis, and therefore an organization would want to get out ahead of the story. They would want to dictate to the media what is happening rather than the media interpret what is going on. This would be very important in maintaining the image through a crisis situation. A reactive response is a way for an organization to hold off on information due to a possible lack of interest by the media. If there is a lack of interest and it may not become a story, releasing too much information could be harmful to the organization. So by holding off, they're waiting to see what situational aspects could happen. The first instance we're going to focus on is Jerry Sandusky, who was a longtime assistant coach at Penn State University under treasured head coach Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno had been a longtime head coach for many decades at Penn State University and made Penn State football program and Penn State University the treasured university that it was. Now, unfortunately, we have found that not everything Joe Paterno did was fantastic. One such issue was with Jerry Sandusky as a longtime coach. Jerry Sandusky had had allegations of sexual abuse since 1976. And it wasn't until 2002 that we actually had reports of an assistant coach telling Joe Paterno that he had visual confirmation of this abuse actually happening within the Penn State locker room. But as you see, from 2002 to 2011, there's a 9-year span before Jerry Sandusky is arrested, which means in this time period between 2001 and 1976, there was multiple instances of cover-up. So how far did that go? Well, we see Joe Paterno, the coach, Tim Curley, the AD, Gary Schultz, the vice president of finance, and Graham Spanier, the president, all lose their positions in order for Penn State University to try to get ahead of this scandal. The latter three were charged with crimes relating to the cover-up, and Joe Paterno did not receive any charges because he died later in 2011. This incident resulted in heavy sanctions from the NCAA and Penn State University, forfeiture of games, titles, and some of the most harsh punishments we see with respect to recruiting. The reason being is the NCAA and Penn State University wanted to make a point that football was not the most important part of what they were doing. The most important part were the morals and values that they were teaching. And thus, we see the downfall of one of the most preeminent head coaches of all time. The proactive response we see here in the situation that was handled by Southwest Airlines with the horrific accident with Flight 1380. The accident happened because of a malfunction in the engine which caused physical damage. This physical damage led to a window being broken, and that window being broken created negative pressure and actually took a passenger and almost sucked them out of the cabin. That passenger was saved by other heroic passengers, but unfortunately the injuries did not allow her to survive. Another great story about this is the female captain, one of the first female captains in Southwest Airlines, who was the captain who was responsible for landing the plane in an emergency situation, and in a situation that could have gone awry really quickly. Luckily, only one passenger was fatally injured. So why was this a proactive response? The immediate communication from the CEO, issuing an apology and being empathetic, really, they took responsibility because it was on their plane, but again, we're asking for empathy and we're trying to get people on their side. There were ongoing updates. There were so many resources used by Southwest Airlines to make sure that the passengers on that flight were taken care of. They got out in front of the information. They called the FAA, the NTSB, to investigate because they knew they had nothing to hide. And the money that they spent on the passengers to make sure that they were okay, the family of the woman who was killed, if you notice in the information that is listed, what this did is really put Southwest Airlines in a positive light in such a negative situation. And one of the more important aspects is where they allowed passengers to speak, and that highlighted the heroic actions of the crew. And this wasn't done from the airline. This wasn't done from the media. This was done from the people on the plane, which again helped Southwest Airlines emerge from this relatively unscathed. So what is the best approach? Well, in these two instances, it would appear that the proactive approach that Southwest Airlines took would be the best. They get in front of the media, they dictate the story, and this helped transform their organization. In times of crisis, we see some of the best situations happen, and thus we see Southwest Airlines save their organization's image. Thank you for listening, and here are the references for my presentation today.